FM, 900 AM. I'm your host, Dr. Safiyya Shabazz, and welcome to the Her Health Matters radio show, where we amplify the voices and stories of African American women and share actionable steps that can improve our health and wellness. We come to you live on the fourth Sunday of every month from 2 to 3 p.m. We're also streaming online at WURDradio.com. You can call us at 215-634-8065 or toll free at 866-361-0900 if you have questions or comments. This show is produced by Community Hero Action Group, a 501c3 nonprofit organization committed to addressing health and wealth disparities within the Black community. Through education, advocacy, and community programming, we work to create sustainable solutions for generational wellness. As we embrace 2025, many of us have made resolutions or are at least reflecting about our health, our careers, and our finances. This time of year often brings reflection on our relationship with money, how we earn it, save it, invest it, and build it for future generations. But for Black women, this reflection comes with a unique set of challenges and also opportunities. The connection between wealth and wellness in our community cannot be overstated. When we talk about health disparities, we must acknowledge their deep roots in economic inequality. Studies show that financial stress directly impacts our physical and mental health, from increasing cortisol levels that contribute to high blood pressure, to limiting our ability to afford preventive care, to affecting the quality of food we can put on our tables. For Black women who often carry both financial and caregiving responsibilities, this stress takes a particular toll. A recent study found that 67% of Black women report experiencing physical symptoms of financial stress, including headaches, anxiety, and disrupted sleep patterns. That's why Her Health Matters is dedicating today's episode to financial wellness. We understand that building wealth isn't just about money. It's about creating the foundation for healthier lives, families, and communities. When we have financial security, we're better able to prioritize our physical and mental well-being, make proactive healthcare choices, and model healthy relationships with both money and with ourselves, self-care for the next generation. So our question of the day, and we hope to hear from you, as we start this new year, what money beliefs or habits are you thinking about changing this year? Please call us at 215-634-8065 or toll free 866-361-0900. Today's episode, we're taking a different approach. I'm super excited. Instead of our usual format, we are going to have an intimate conversation. We're having book club today. We're going to be discussing the book, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Our executive producer was in the process of reading this book, and she shared it with me. I downloaded it on Audible, and we found ourselves really equally moved, and kind of a lot of the points really resonated with me about the insights and how they relate specifically to Black women's experiences with wealth and wellness. So we knew we had to bring this discussion and conversation to you. I wanted to reflect on an important point the book made. I just wanted to refer to it. I made a note where they said money and health are two topics that affect your life, whether you're interested in it or not. So, this show is about health, it's about wellness, and you don't have to be interested in health or wealth, but it will affect you either way. So I'm so happy to welcome our special guest today, the executive producer for the Her Health Matters radio show, Nicole Keels-McGruder. Nicole is also the founding, she is the founder and CEO of Community Hero Action Group, CHAG, a nonprofit organization that empowers and mobilizes citizens to address social issues and promote civic engagement. She has years of experience in leading and executing local and statewide projects that aim to improve the quality of life and well-being of under-resourced communities. She's passionate about creating positive change and fostering collaboration among stakeholders, partners, and volunteers. As a social innovator, activist, and community leader, Nicole has proven skills in consultation, workshop facilitation, team building, strategic planning, and oversight. She is the chair of the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference, most recent chair of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission's Advisory Board for Philadelphia, a member of the University of Pennsylvania's Abrams Cancer Center's Community Advisory Board, the 2020 Political Action Chair for the NAACP State Conference, and the recipient of the 2024 Pennsylvania Chapter of the National Association of Social Workers Public Citizen of the Year Award. Not to mention, if that wasn't enough, she's a proud Girl Scout leader, mom, and wife. So welcome to today's show, Nicole. I am really excited to have you join me today. You know, this is like the woman that makes it all happen behind the scenes. And so I'm really glad that we get to, the audience gets to share today's show with you. So I wanted to, I guess, start off by talking to you about your vision of today's conversation, because it really, I think it's right on time, the topic. So, what's your vision?
Thank you so much. I want to say thank you for all that you do, and being on the front lines and in front of the camera every month to make it happen. So appreciate you and respect you so much. And welcome listeners again, like Dr. Safiyya Shabazz just introduced me, and all that sounds fantastic, but today I am here as a Black woman from the community. So my vision for today's conversation, I'll actually answer it in two parts. The vision and then what inspired the vision. So I wanted to create this accessible conversation of Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, and examine how it relates to us as Black women. And for today's conversation to feel like two friends at the house talking real about money, about our experiences, how those experiences have shaped our mindsets, and also the challenges that we have around wealth and some of the misinformation that we have dealt with, and discuss our own practical strategies and also struggles in building generational prosperity. And for all of the listeners, we're going to talk about the unique way that money psychology shows up for our communities and our families, and sharing our very unique money stories. We are not a monolith. We hear that a lot, but I just want to be very, very clear. We are not experts. We are not here to provide advice. We're going to share our personal stories, and we hope that you call in to share your personal stories, and that's how we can get to a better and more prosperous place if we all share and respect our respective personal backgrounds and differences as we go through this conversation. So today's conversation is for every sister out there who has ever wondered about her relationship with money, who maybe has never thought that she even has a relationship with money, and I found that we all do.
Right.
And like Dr. Shabazz said, like, even if you're not thinking about it, you do have a relationship with money. So I'm going to shift just a tad bit to talk about why this is important and why I believe that bringing this to the audience is so very important. And it connects to the work that Community Hero does and a new initiative that we're starting that is around generational wealth. So there was an analysis that was completed by Prosperity Now and the Institute for Policy Studies that projects by the year 2053, which is less than 30 years from now, that Black households will have a median wealth of zero. I don't know if you heard me in the back, but zero. To me, that is an emergency. I don't really hear a lot of folks talking about that specifically. You can go to communityheropa.org/wealth to find a hyperlink to that article on Forbes. And then within that article, you can find the link to the actual study to read it yourself, because it's important that we become empowered and educated. Don't take my word for it. Go out there and read the study for yourself. But to me, that's an emergency, and that's something that we really need to talk about in a substantive way. So we talk about income inequality, and that's what kind of gets, all of the prime time. But it's also about those systemic barriers, right? And those things that have been there historically that have prevented wealth accumulation in our community. And if we look specifically at Black women, the number's even worse. Black women possess about $200 in median wealth, and white single women hold an average of about $15,640. So as the article notes, the article in Forbes notes that income inequality captures the attention, but it's wealth inequality that it's often hidden, and we don't address that. That's why we need to really address it head on. And the only way that we can do that is to start with ourselves consciously, to be conscious of the way that we perceive money in our relationship. And that leads us back to today's conversation. So if we get in a better space with ourselves in our relationship, then we can better help the community and our families. So
I think so many times we don't really understand what's working in our minds around money. And I think, there's not a straight line cause and effect to our circumstances, but a lot of the times our behaviors are getting us the opposite of what we want, because there are things below the surface that we're not even aware of in terms of our psychology that are in play when it comes to money. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. They highlight a couple of different stories, but one, just to bring it, where if you think that you don't have enough money to even build wealth, they included a story about a man. He was a janitor. He didn't make hardly any money at all, but when he died, he had these millions of dollars, I think, and he left 2 million to his stepchildren and 6 million to some important causes to him. And I thought that was really an important story to highlight, because so many times people feel like and my dad used to say this. My dad grew up during the Depression, where he's like, well, I have to spend it now because I might not have it later, because that was his psychology around money, where, with a different lens, you can just be more steady and moderate and have opportunities to build wealth, which to me is freedom. That was something that really, really resonated with me in the book, how it can represent freedom to do or not do the things you want to do as much as you can with the people you want, not do the things you don't want to do. And so, that concept of freedom and how, money and wealth can create freedom really was important to me. So again, you're tuned to the Her Health Matters radio show. I'm Dr. Safiyya Shabazz, and I'm here today with our executive producer, Nicole Keels-McGruder, on WURD Radio 900 AM and 96.1 FM. We welcome you to pull up your chair, chat with us, call in, let us know, we're going to have a little sister talk here. What money beliefs or habits are you changing this year? We're talking about wealth and the psychology of money today. Mind over money, rewiring your wealth mindset. Call 215-634-8065 or toll free 866-361-0900 to join this conversation. So I'm really glad that you shed light on this topic for this episode. It's really important. So let's dig into this book and discuss the difference between being wealthy versus being rich. You talked about, having a wealth of zero, but I imagine people are still going to be working. So what does that mean? There's a difference between these two things. They're often used synonymously, but clearly there's a difference, because I imagine that in whatever year that was, what was it, 2053? When we're projected to have zero wealth, I imagine that we're still going to have some type of income. So what's the difference?
For me, wealth is being able to do what I want to do, with whom I want to do it, when I want to do it, and having the resources to do it, and a peace of mind. So, sometimes we can have, those top four, but maybe we still are overspending a little bit, or we are still stressed out when we are taking that trip. That's still not wealth. So when you have all of those things together, that is what true wealth is. But unfortunately, I think a lot of times we are chasing what we believe wealth is, but it's actually riches. As Black women, I'll talk for myself. I see the Range Rovers, I see those with the red bottoms, I see the IG reels, and sometimes mistakenly think like, wow, that should be me. I work hard.
I like nice
I want
things.
those. Yeah, exactly. I want that too. Why not? And the only thing that I really know, I'm equating that person's what appears to be a fantastic life to being wealthy. And the only thing that I really, really know about that person is that they spent X amount of dollars on that thing. That's it. Whether it was cash, credit, doesn't matter. Maybe they have a good credit score, but they still have that debt that I don't know about. So it's hard for us to see the wealth. And that's why I think people have a hard time attaining wealth. What we see is those things that we buy. And that's unfortunately what we try to emulate. And that's what it resonated with me. There was a point that he makes in the book about focus on building invisible wealth versus displaying status. So when you think about
that's
that,
particularly hard for us because we have
yes.
had such a low status in society and,
Mhm.
have been treated with such a great level of disrespect that we are really sometimes fighting hard to achieve status and to really kind of prove our reason to be respected, which really there is no dollar amount on that. Who should be respected? We all should be respected. But yeah, we're going to struggle with that one.
Yeah, and it's the psychology of it all. I mean, I love, it's an adrenaline rush sometimes when you're online and you make that click and you're like, yes, I just bought whatever that was. And I used to that used to be a challenge for me. And I was like, hey, it's only this, but it's those little small micro activities that we do every day that creates our life, right?
Right.
So by like reading a lot more than that I have in the past and making sure that I educate myself more. So now I look at everything that I purchase as non-appreciating assets or so if all these clothes that I think that I want, or do I want those assets that are going to help me build wealth? And it has made me a lot better with my spending habits because I have now, figured out what I want my perfect life to be. And that perfect life for me means that those things that I mentioned, I'm able to go and do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I can't do that if I buy that new dress every week or every time paycheck comes around. No,
Right.
that end of the rainbow is more important to me than that quick fix. So for me, that helps just psychologically because we don't act as rational beings. We're
Right.
people. And we can see the lists and we read the books and all that. But if we don't deal with the fact that we are irrational beings and making sure that we accept that, okay, what can I do to switch those gears where now I think about this in a different way? It's
Right.
difficult, I think, difficult for us to, attain wealth.
Right. And I mean, in the very first chapter, Halsell asserts that no one's crazy. That's actually the title of that chapter. He's arguing that everyone has their own personal relationship with money based on their unique experiences. So no one's crazy. So whatever choices you make, you're not crazy, but our money stories often include watching our mothers stretch dollars, a lot of self denial, or participating in church savings clubs or being the first in our family to achieve a certain educational status, income status, or even the first to ever invest. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that, um, you know, our experiences, like I was saying about my dad, he was born in 1927. The stock market crash was like 1929. So his lens is going to be his lens. And that he's not crazy, or he wasn't crazy, nor am I crazy, because I might have watched, okay, the other side of that. Like, I don't want to feel like sometimes I have money and then other times I don't have any at all. So I might tend to be more on, the more moderate side, where I'm kind of denying myself maybe. But at the same time, the other concept I really liked was the concept of, like, I mentioned it already, the freedom part, because I like to say I want to be a caring, sharing, money making machine. I want to be able to do good for the community and share and all of that. It does require money. Like, the people
Mhm.
who really can make a big impact in society, it does require some type of financial resources to really be effective.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
So,
you are absolutely right. And I was thinking about this as we were preparing for this show, and I'm thinking, as a Black female physician, what does that feel like when the expectations may be there for you to look a certain way, have certain things, because in, the perception of a doctor, oh, everything is laid out, everything is perfect.
mhm,
Think about wealth and riches. So it's all these different personas that you
right.
have to deal with.
And I remember feeling, when I was finishing my residency program, and I remember, like, being a few months from finishing and talking to my son at the time, like, in a few months, like, we won't have any money worries at all, type thing, because it just, that was the goalpost at that time, where then you get there and, um you know it changes. And one of the points that the author makes is to really get ahead of that and stop moving the goalposts, like, to
Mm.
establish it where you can get to a point where you have gotten there, where you have, you know, enough. And so you don't have to keep, always feel like you're not living up or measuring up, to your expectations. And that can be a really tough thing to do, because I so distinctly remember that. I mean, going from a resident salary to an attending salary, and I'm like,
Yes, here you
okay,
go. It's about
we're never going to worry about money again. And it just doesn't work that way. And sometimes it is a little bit of, societal expectations, where I remember a relative was, concerned about my car not seeming like, a doctor's car. And
I can
where,
only imagine.
yeah. But, sometimes I do feel, I know, I guess, just a little bit of background. My career path, I've spent the last 15 years self-employed. I have my own, private medical practice, and nowadays the healthcare industry isn't really set up for that. Like, unless you're, doing concierge. But, I have a large Medicaid population, Medicare. I do have a, sort of like a concierge light, group of patients as well. But in this current setting, it's not, a type of thing where I'm just raking in lots of cash. But at the same time, I really, really value certain things that I've only been able to do because of having my practice or being an independent practice. That time freedom is one of those things where I can, if I work more, I can make more money. If I work less, then I make less. But I can choose to. I remember when my son was applying to boarding schools, it was through a better chance, and you had to be ready to move on a dime and go visit these different places and set up these interviews. There's no way I would have been able to do that if I was in another type of work setting. And I remember even, Ayla Stanford talking about how she wouldn't have been able to do the work that she did with COVID if she hadn't been in independent practice. She had the freedom to kind of, like, move on a dime and make some decisions independently of, someone over her telling her what she could and couldn't do because of her obligations with work. So I think, I don't know, that's It's a candid conversation. That's all the way
No,
around the
this
world.
this
Say
is
like,
that. No, actually, it wasn't. That goes right in line with the book. It's that freedom, and you can't put a price on that. So, what is your enough?
right.
And it sounds like you have had some a serious internal discussion about what your enough is, and that freedom trumps what might look to others like, oh, you can get more money doing this and doing that. But at the end of the day,
Or
yeah.
you're so smart. Like, why'd you do family medicine? You could have done anything. Like,
Like,
I
wait,
guess.
what is that?
But in general, and I mean that's a whole other discussion because in general, people do what works for them. Like they make the decisions that are best for them. And as a society, whether we're talking about education and teachers, and people say, "Oh, education is so important," but then if teachers, if people who are really skilled and qualified and great at teaching aren't compensated in a way that it makes sense for them and their families to do it, then it really, it's like, as a society, what do we really value? Because it's important. And I would say the same things with healthcare or primary care in particular. So yeah, I know we have these ideas, but then it shifts on me like, okay, well, you have to line up what your values are and how to prioritize them. And everything takes balance. I mean, you definitely want balance because you can help more people if you have more money. That's true.
Right.
And you certainly want to, for your family to have some level of stability. And, I know for myself, we didn't have financial stability growing up. Although at the same time, my parents had traveled around the world with Muhammad Ali, had seen things that the average broke person had never seen in their life. And, that their experience definitely influenced, my upbringing. But I also got to experience the part where, like, our gas was cut off for a prolonged period of time. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want that. The highs were high and the lows were low. And yeah, that's not my jam. So
So back to like where you started, like no one's crazy. We
right.
all act out based upon our personal experiences. And now I'm, the founder of this organization and doing all these fabulous things. And I've been a single parent
Hmm.
with children. And now I am a married woman with children. So I have these different experiences that impact the way that I feel about money. And I'm still working through things because it's a part of who I am. So as a single parent, my psyche was completely different, but it's still with me, right? So I was counting every dollar, making sure I had backup for the backup
Mm,
because I was the only safety net. So there was always this heightened level of stress because failure was not an option and I was going to make this work. So, but like what we just spoke about, I always wanted to make sure that my children never felt like they were missing out on anything. So, yes, we still took our road trips. We're still having family fun days. We're not going to miss a beat. But as I reflect back now, I think that I was buying way too much
hmm.
because I was concerned about the invisible they that might be judging the single parent. So
Right.
my idea of wealth and was trading my dollars for time.
Right.
So there was a time, and I thought to me psychologically that made sense.
Hmm.
And there was a time where I worked 3 jobs. There were actually I did that several times. But it's important to now that I know better, but I thought that, okay, once I start making more money, kind of like, what
Right.
you were describing, like, okay, things are going to get better. So I'm working, all these shifts and I'm going to go to undergrad. I'm going to complete my master's. Okay, now I'm a director. Now I teach classes online. Uh, I'm still, why does my bank account still not feel like I have
Right.
progressed further than where I think because I still had those same habits. I still didn't have that, I felt like I didn't have that education or those discussions about what to do with money outside of save, throw it in the bank. That was probably the extent. Hopefully you can figure out how to invest.
Right.
My mother worked for the airline every single day until she retired from the airlines. My father worked his entire life and then, retired from the post office. So I came from a family who, worked to obtain money. And that's what I thought the path was. And that was my strategy. And psychologically, I thought that I was
And I
checking
mean,
all the
it's
boxes
a
and
strategy. It's definitely a
doing.
strategy.
But the other piece, and I know we're going to talk about that later, but like once you get the wealth, and I think that's the piece that's missing. How do you make the dollars work for you? How do you invest? How do you save?
Hmm.
What vehicles should you be saving in? And we don't really have those conversations, and it typically stops kind of, it really, I don't think the conversations are really held in a substantive way where we actually know what to do with our dollars. Even when we start making more money, there are like the janitor.
Hmm.
Obviously, he figured it out. He didn't have this fabulous education. He didn't have what you think the technical expertise around investing, but he had those habits.
Right, because that's the
Those
main thing is the
habits. Yes.
consistency. And I mean, the
Yeah.
same thing is true with health because, okay, you could say, oh, I'm going to a boot camp and I'm going to get in shape and all of that. But if you walk 20 minutes every day and were extremely consistent starting from a very young age and you just did that consistently, you are almost certainly going to have dividends that you collect in your older years because you had those steady, consistent habits. And sometimes it's not like a major, earth shattering thing. It's like the day to day consistency and starting as early as you can. I remember running into, at one point, I had a personal trainer, and I remember running into an older gentleman. At the time, he seemed older compared to the age I was at the time. Maybe I'm that age now, but he's like, oh, I wish I had done this 15 years ago. I wish I had started this 15 years ago. And, when with our money and wealth building, the most important thing is to like get started and to be consistent, which might be a goal, a money goal or habit to change. I was thinking about our question of the day and what things I am going to change. I know that I have the ability to like sit down and think through and problem solve, but I found that when I get overwhelmed with financial worries, I don't like to worry about money. So I might put my head in the sand, and it's like as long as I have enough to make it to the next day, I just don't even think about it. And I've decided that that's something that has to change. So, really being more careful and looking at um, my finances. And a friend of mine, refers to their money as their children, and they have to, supervise their children as they go out every day to make sure that they come home. And I'm like, yeah, I need to start supervising my children more regularly because I just put my head in the sand like, ah.
Hopefully I'll make it back home safely.
Exactly. Like, oh, somebody came home. I don't know if this was everybody that was supposed to come home or not, but somebody's here. That's great.
Exactly.
Well, once again, this is Dr. Safiyya. We are here on the Her Health Matters radio show on WURD Radio. We are with she's a doctor of putting the show together, that's for sure. And Nicole Keels-McGruder, the executive producer of the Her Health Matters radio show, is CEO of Community Hero Action Group, and we're digging into the book, The Psychology of Money. On today's episode, Mind Over Money, Rewiring Your Wealth Mindset. Call in to share your money beliefs or habits. Any insights that you have. It's a sister circle discussion today. So call us at 215-634-8065 or toll free 866-361-0900. So let's talk about this quote from the book. Your savings rate has little to do with how much you earn and a lot to do with how much control you have over your ego. You would think it's how much control you have over your spending. No, how much control you have over your ego. What? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, right. And that one stuck with me as well. And I will accept that. Yes. Okay. We often buy because of ego. We want others to look at us and say, "Oh, I have this status, and I want to gain the respect and admiration of others." But as he breaks it down in the book, they're like, they really don't care about you and what you
Oh,
have. They're just comparing themselves like, oh, I can get that too. Like, I think we were saying at the beginning, like, I can get that. They're not really, they don't have this newfound respect for you. They are
right.
not obsessing for you about you in the way that you believe that
Hmm.
this new thing is going to now create, all these, this new vibe. It's not that. And
Right.
unfortunately, we do that, and we're chasing this false sense of respect and admiration that is really a figment of our imaginations.
It
So,
is. It's,
um,
I don't think that's like ever been my issue, wanting to impress other people, but like you see it like this mega, these super fancy cars and, not just one, but two and three and, the jewelry and all this stuff where you see people start to do weird things to get it. And then,
you know what? Exactly. And I don't need, I think like we all have this like ego because I'm not really one to like, I don't buy name brand stuff. I've never been into that. And that's okay. Some people do some that I'm not trying to judge. But I think even like talking about ego at the very, very basic level, sometimes we still do things that aren't in our best financial
right.
interest because we believe it will look a certain way.
Hmm.
So perhaps I had on something and I don't want to repeat the next time I'm at this meeting,
Right.
or I feel like people are the silliest things that we
That is
think
true.
about. It's like these people are not, don't care about
They
that.
don't care about
And
you.
they don't. And we do all these little things that we believe that actually put us in a worse financial position when we don't have to. When we talk about the cars and upgrading perhaps unnecessarily,
Yeah.
and yeah,
You know what though? I do think that social media has
uh,
really compounded it because I will admit that I do think more about wearing the same thing multiple times because everybody's taking pictures and they're posting on social media and then it's like, oh, that's the same thing I had on last time. So then I'm like, oh, starting to think about that,
mhm,
like, oh,
mhm.
well, I can't wear the same thing. And then you're buying more stuff and then you're overwhelmed with clutter in your house because you've got all this stuff. And, you know, yeah, we all do it, I suppose, to one degree or the other. And there's nothing wrong. I think we all should, I think it's really important to feel good about yourself and to look good. And because I do think it adds to your um, confidence, I do think that is important. But in general, people are worried about themselves. They're not really thinking all that hard about you. They're worried about themselves. And that's problem number one, two, and three for them. Like they probably didn't put that much thought into you and what you have or don't have.
You know what? We're talking about this book, and there is this documentary on Netflix that now escapes me. But basically, it's just about us being consumers and how everything is kind of rigged around us, around just society creating this false sense of need. And oh, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that I needed that. Oh, I need that too. Or now I need this because they create this sense of urge, like now you need to
Right,
buy. So we become these over consumers and we
right,
believe that we have control over it. And it's like once you start to understand, like, no, I'm being manipulated. No, I don't need that new iPhone.
right,
No, I don't need that particular upgrade. Oh no, my I might get wrinkles in 5 years. So let me start using this
right.
$200 serum now so that I won't need it. So all these
Right.
things
Like, do,
are
do I
also
really
working
need
against
a
us.
screen on my refrigerator? I don't know. Maybe I don't know
Maybe
if I
I
need that.
do.
Maybe I do. Maybe I didn't know I was missing out on Wi-Fi on my washer and dryer all this time.
I don't know how I was living out here.
Exactly. How did we survive?
Yes.
So,
Yes. So that and
And some
understanding,
things
like,
are great ideas that maybe you just would have never realized you do need until, you
it's
are exposed to it.
some are, and I keep going back to clothing because I know that is sometimes like a weakness for some, both men and women.
Hmm.
And what was interesting, they were talking about how clothes have almost become disposable because they're so inexpensive, and I can
Right.
just go out and buy this or that. And bringing it full circle around like how it affects the environment. There was a segment where it talked about the donations that we like, okay, I have too much, I have all this clutter. Now I'm going to put it all together and I'm going to give it away. And so now I feel better. It went to charity. And
Mm,
they're like, no, half that stuff still ends up in the landfill. And then those items that are being donated to these, under-resourced countries, they showed their beaches covered in clothing and shoes. And they're like,
right.
they get over 5 million pieces of clothing a week. So they can't even utilize it. So it's like when you start to look at like how your habits not only affect you and your wealth,
My
but just
daughter's
how
like really
the world.
into that whole thing about textile waste as well. And, a lot of and we're learning more, I almost don't even want to know about the health consequences of some of the synthetic materials and all of that, but
The
it
forever plastics, yeah, and all that good stuff. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
microplastics. And so there's a number of reasons for us to, really pull back on some of these things or challenge some of these norms that are new norms, really. Um, so let's switch or kind of like dive deeper into this topic of savings and freedom. According to the book, savings provides flexibility and freedom beyond just retirement planning. It gives you options when life changes, and it protects against uncertainty, which is more valuable than things that are higher investment returns in the early stages of wealth building. So in the book, Housel emphasizes that a high savings rate is more important than generating exceptional investment returns, particularly in the beginning of a person's financial journey. So what are your thoughts about that? So basically, you know, he's saying like you don't have to pick winners. You just have to save a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that back to the psychology of it all, sometimes we think we don't have enough money to save. So we instead say, you know what, once I start making more money, then I'll save.
Right.
And that day really never comes if you never get in the habit of saving when you have. So back when I was making $12.50 an hour, and you're telling me to put 25 or $50 away into my retirement account or in a savings account, I'm like, I can't afford that. Back then it didn't seem logical to me because no, I need to make sure that I'm liquid enough to be able to bob and weave, and not realizing that that savings would have given me that flexibility. So I think like we've all been in situations where, perhaps we're, working somewhere and our boss is maybe not the greatest. And now you go into work the next day and now you're going to be managing 10 more individuals. You're not going to be on call. You're not going to be paid for it. And
Right.
you now have to travel. If you don't have a savings account or you don't have something, any type of buffer, you don't have that freedom to tell that boss to go kick rocks. You
Right.
have to sometimes take those things that you normally wouldn't if you had that buffer, if you had that safety net. So that's what I took from it.
Right.
And I had I'm on my second time reading it, and of course you go down the rabbit hole. And
Mm,
so I had discovered something simple as high yield savings accounts. I'm like, oh, it sounds fancy when I heard about it years and years ago, and I'm like, oh, it's just another account and I can open it up and I get 4% versus the 0.001 that I probably get having it at one of these other banks. That adds up over time. That
right.
really adds up over time. So it's just like understanding that savings and just the compounding habit of savings is fantastic. And then also then just being strategic about, okay, where am I saving as well? Again, I will preface this to say we are not tax advisors, financial advisors. Please do
No.
your own research.
But like simple things like that,
just,
like people told me when I was younger, like it did stick with me. Like just the general overall concept of like a 401k, or where if you're like in a nonprofit type setup or educational 403b, where okay, if they're matching a certain amount, that's like you instantly double your money. Like that's pretty easy concept for me
right,
to understand.
exactly. Right now,
And
it sounds like, duh.
yeah, not too many things you instantly double your money, but that okay, I got it. Or like okay, if you put whatever you put in, it's not like you're going to have. Let's say you put in $100. It's not like you're going to really have $100 less in your paycheck because it took down the amount that got taxed. So it actually is only a portion that really less. I don't even know what the calculation is, but let's say it's like your paycheck might come down a little bit, but not the whole $100 because it was like money that didn't get taxed. So then it's
It's a
kind of
win-win.
like a form of free money. Yes.
Yes.
So basic concepts like that really did help me. And, and another point about just having freedom in this whole overall long-term savings plan, he was saying like by having a cushion, it keeps you from taking money out of that long-term savings vehicle, because when you do that, you rob yourself of the advantage of time being in that process or being in the market. So then like you want to have another buffer so that you could leave that alone and not not disturb it, because every time you do that you kind of really set yourself back by a lot of years, because the time is one of the major advantages. So I like that concept. And even he talked about how many people in a lower income bracket don't have $400 to cover like an emergency, let's say an auto repair or something like that. But most of, they said the average person spends, no, not the average person, lottery ticket buyers, they're like tend to be lower income and spend $400 a year on lottery tickets, something that with like a 1 in a million chance of winning, when it would have been better for them to just save the $400 to get them through a rough patch. But it's just hard. The psychology part of it is hard for people to work through, to not buy the lottery ticket, to just all that money that would have gone to lottery tickets, just save it so that if you have, you need to get your tire fixed, like it's there and you don't have to, really do something else or use money that costs more to get, whether that's from borrowing at a high interest rate or, I know there are people that do things that, might compromise their freedom. Oh, that was another, I thought I wrote that point down where he was talking about how you don't want to compromise the things you really care about, or put the things you really care about at risk for things you really don't care about. And I
Yes.
think a lot of times people do that. Like there's so many people who are in situations, whether that's like, I think a lot of times people end up in legal situations where they compromise things that they really did care about, like their family, their children, whatever. They compromise those things for something they didn't really care about that much. Like if they wanted a certain thing and they don't really care about the Joneses that much, they did care about their children more, but now the children, they have to leave them to go and, pay whatever penalty for the, mistake they made. So I, um, that was a concept that the next thing I wanted to talk about, it really, someone told me a quote when I was in college, and the quote is, "Nothing is enough for the man for whom enough is too little." Nothing is enough. And so it brings up this question of what is enough? when the goalposts are moving, what really is enough. So, you know, do you have any thoughts about that?
That one is difficult. And again, it's, I think it all comes from, our experiences. So for me, having experience, not having enough.
Hmm.
And so sometimes it feels like, okay, well, if I get just a little bit more, I'll be that much more safer because I'll have a larger safety net.
Right.
So it's not, for me personally, it's not necessarily greed. It's fear of never wanting to be in a situation where I don't have enough for basics or make sure that I am always safe and protected financially. So that, psychologically speaking, that is why I might move the goalpost. But now I know that that's not healthy.
Right.
And we have to understand, like, nope, commit to it. I have to respect the Nicole now to make a decision. And Nicole 10 years from now needs to remember that Nicole now had her best interest at heart, and this was the goalpost. And
Right.
that's what we're going to stick to.
Yes.
Man, I wish we had so much more
I
time.
know. I know. I can't
But
believe. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like running out of time. I'm glad that you were able to join us and have this discussion. Maybe people are really sitting and thinking quietly in their thoughts. But I want to move into our policy and women segment because as we discuss wealth in our community, we want to examine policies that affect economic opportunity. Across the country, 21 states are raising the minimum wage this year. Pennsylvania remains at the federal rate of $7.25 an hour. For Black women who are overrepresented in minimum wage jobs, the stagnant wage continues to impact wealth building potential. Another crucial policy area is pay equity legislation requiring salary transparency and prohibiting employers from asking about salary history. So these transparent wage practices really could help close the persistent gap that compounds over time, affecting not just your current income, but long-term accumulation of wealth, your potential for long-term wealth accumulation. So contact your representatives, visit legis.state.pa.us to enter your address, find your representative, and voice support for minimum wage increase and pay equity. You can get involved by connecting with Community Hero at communityheropa.org and document wage disparities in your workplace and submit testimony to legislative committee. Together, wage and pay equity policies represent important steps towards economic justice, but they're just part of the solution, which leads us into our next and final segment. As we work to build generational wealth, we need both policy change and community action, which is why initiatives like our new Pennsylvania Urban Wealth Project are so crucial in providing education and resources for wealth building despite systemic barriers. So today, I'm excited to announce the launch of Pennsylvania Urban Wealth Project, Community Heroes Wealth Building Initiative. Starting on February 17th, this program will offer educational resources, a new YouTube series dedicated to financial planning, and access to wealth building resources and tools. To ensure you don't miss the launch, visit communityheropa.org/contact us to sign up for notifications. We also encourage you to check out Community Heroes website for other events, resources, and opportunities. Next, I want to share about our annual festival, which has a new name. It's no longer the Health in Action Festival, but has evolved into Community in Action Festival, which is representative of the new health and wealth focus of the event. In partnership with State Representative Joanna McClinton on May 17th. So mark your calendars, save the date. We're going to provide important health and financial related resources free of charge. So that is it for today. This show is produced by Community Hero Action Group, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to addressing health and wealth disparities in the Black community. Thank you to our executive producer, Nicole Keels-McGruder, the founder and chief executive officer of Community Hero Action Group. Thanks again to our WURD
We taking time out today to talk about our health.